In Africa, his words ignite movements. But across the ocean, in the streets of America, his message echoes with a different kind of fire. Because in every corner of the United States where black communities struggle against racism, Traore's voice feels like thunder breaking the silence. Stand tall. Be proud of who you are. Your history did not begin with slavery. It began with kings, queens, warriors, and builders of civilizations the world still studies today. Ibrahim Traore, the young president of Burkina Faso, rose from the soil of Africa with a conviction so unshakable that even the most powerful nations had to pause. At just 36 years old, he leads not only with military discipline but with the heart of a teacher, reminding his people and the world that black skin has never been a curse but a crown. This is what terrifies racists. Not guns, not protests, but the rise of a fearless black voice telling millions of others to see their worth again. For decades, racism thrived on one idea, that black people should feel less, think less, dream less. But when a leader like Traore steps onto the stage, that illusion collapses. His presence is proof that the world is changing, that black excellence is not the exception, but the rule waiting to be reclaimed. And here lies the fear factor. When black men and women in America, Africa, Europe, everywhere hear Traore's words, they stop bowing their heads. They look in the mirror and see power, not shame. And when that shift happens, racism loses its grip. This is the story of how one man, leading a small West African nation, is shaking the foundations of white supremacy far beyond his borders. And this is just the beginning. In America, racism is not hidden. It shows up in neighborhoods where black children grow up doubting themselves, in workplaces where black men and women are told they don't belong, and in streets where skin color can mean the difference between safety and danger. But then, voices like Ibrahim Traore rise. And suddenly, the game changes. Traore does not preach hatred. He does not tell black people to seek revenge. Instead, he says something far more powerful. You are not less. You are not weak. Your blackness is your strength, your pride, your history. Never let anyone make you feel ashamed of who you are. For African Americans who have carried the heavy chains of racism for generations, these words cut deep. Imagine a young man in Chicago, tired of being profiled every time he steps outside. Or a young woman in Atlanta, constantly told her natural hair isn't professional enough. When they hear Traore, they hear more than a leader, they hear hope. He teaches that true power is not just in resisting racism, but in shattering the idea that racism can define you. And that's what terrifies racists the most. Because when black men and women begin to walk with pride instead of pain, racism has no weapon left. But here's where Traore's message becomes even more dangerous to the racist mindset. He doesn't just call for pride among blacks, he calls for love, unity, and peace. Do not answer hate with hate, he says. Because when you rise with dignity and extend love even to those who once hated you, the world will stand with you, and even the children of racists will turn against racism itself. Imagine the fear in the hearts of white supremacists when they realize even their own sons and daughters are no longer buying into hate. When they see young people, black and white, standing side by side, proud and equal, refusing to be divided. This is the revolution Traore inspires, not a revolution of guns, but of hearts. And revolutions of the heart are unstoppable. Across America, more and more black people are beginning to reclaim pride in their roots, learning about African history, wearing it like armor, and walking like kings and queens in a world that once tried to strip them of that identity. This is why racists fear Traore. Because he is planting seeds of strength not only in Africa, but in every black soul that dares to listen. And once those seeds grow, no wall of hatred can stop them. For decades, American racists have hidden behind a system that quietly benefits them, redlining neighborhoods, underfunding black schools, or filling prisons with young black men. They believed this system was unbreakable. They thought fear would keep black people in check. But Ibrahim Traore's words hit like a thunderclap across oceans. He says, "If Africa will no longer bow, then neither should you. If Africa will no longer sell its soul, then neither should you. Stand, because you were never meant to kneel. Imagine the shockwaves in racist communities when they see Black Americans listening, nodding, and rising taller than ever. Because what Traore is doing is pulling back the curtain, exposing that the real power was never in racism, but in unity. This is why he terrifies racists. Not because he tells Black people to hate them, but because he teaches them to stop fearing them. And fear is the only weapon racism has ever truly had. When that weapon is taken away, the empire of hate starts to crumble. Think about it. What happens when a young Black man in New York realizes he is more than just statistics? What happens when a Black mother in Detroit no longer teaches her child to stay quiet and small, but instead tells them, walk proud, because you are equal to anyone? Racists begin to lose control. Their greatest nightmare comes true. A generation of Black Americans who refuse to be victims, who refuse to let hate define their destiny. But Traore's challenge goes even deeper. He doesn't just talk about equality, he dares to flip the script. He reminds the world that Black people have been creators, builders, scientists, warriors, and visionaries long before anyone else wrote history books. That truth shakes racists to the core. Because if Black people reclaim their rightful place in history, then racism's biggest lie, that Black means less, is shattered forever. And here's the irony that terrifies them most. Traore's message is not a war cry, it's a peace cry. He's not saying, destroy your enemies. He's saying, show them a better way. When racists realize that love, dignity, and unshakable pride can unite people across color lines. When they see white allies standing shoulder to shoulder with Black brothers and sisters, refusing to bow to hate. That is when racism truly begins to die. This is why Ibrahim Traore's voice is feared. Because he is not just talking to Africa. He is talking to Harlem, to Atlanta, to Los Angeles, to every street where a young Black man or woman once felt invisible. And suddenly they feel seen. They feel powerful. They feel unstoppable. At first, the world thought Ibrahim Traore's words were only meant for Africa. They believed his message was just another call for sovereignty, just another speech about independence from foreign powers. But slowly, people realized they had misunderstood him. Traore wasn't just speaking to Africans. He was speaking to everyone, to anyone who had ever been told they were less, to anyone who had suffered under the shadow of hate, and even to those who had allowed hatred to consume them. His voice carried two unshakable truths. First, that Black people everywhere must rise, unashamed and unbroken, proud of who they are and where they come from. Second, that true victory over racism cannot be won through revenge or bitterness. It must be achieved through dignity, equality, and love. And that combination? That's what terrifies racists the most. Because think about it, a racist can fight back if he believes you hate him. He can twist your anger into a weapon, paint you as the enemy, and justify his fear. But when you rise above that trap, when you stand tall, proud of your identity, and still extend love even to those poisoned by hate, then you have taken away his power. You've left him defenseless. That's why American racists tremble when they hear Traore's words. Because deep down, they know their days are numbered if Black Americans stop carrying the burden of inferiority and instead embrace themselves as leaders of a new global movement of dignity. But here's the twist. Traore's message does not only awaken Black pride, it begins to attract allies. White Americans who are tired of living in a society poisoned by racism. Latino families who understand what it feels like to be marginalized. Asian communities who have endured discrimination in silence. Suddenly, they all begin to see themselves reflected in this fight. Racism stops being about Black versus white. It transforms into a universal battle between human dignity and human hate. Picture the scenes. A young Black man in Chicago, who once doubted his worth, now stands firm and says, I am not less than anyone. My life matters. My future matters. A white teacher in Texas, refusing to let racist voices dominate her classroom, standing with her Black students as equals, guiding them with courage. A group of young people in New York, Black, white, Latino, Asian, all marching side by side, not with anger burning in their eyes, but with hope shining in their voices as they chant, equal, proud, free. This is the nightmare of the racist, because racists thrive on division. They need fear, mistrust, and hatred to survive. But if people of all races begin uniting, if communities come together under the banner of equality, then racism has no foundation left to stand on. And this is where Traore's influence becomes undeniable. He is showing the world that Africa's fight for independence is not separate from America's struggle for justice. It is the same fight. He connects continents and generations, proving that whether in Burkina Faso or in Harlem, whether in Ghana or in Detroit, the demand is the same: dignity. That is the real fear factor. Not weapons, not armies, not sanctions. The true weapon is an idea. An idea so powerful that once it is planted in the hearts of millions, it can never be erased. Because when Black pride transforms into global unity, something extraordinary begins to happen. The hate that has divided humanity for centuries begins to collapse. And for the first time, people can imagine a world not built on color or race, but on mutual respect, love, and peace. The story of Ibrahim Traore does not end with speeches in Burkina Faso. It does not stay locked within Africa's borders. His words travel like fire carried by the wind, crossing oceans, echoing through cities, and settling deep inside the hearts of millions who thought no one truly understood their struggles. In America, where racism has written painful chapters for centuries, his message lands like a thunderclap. Young Black men and women hear him and suddenly see their reflection in a new way. They no longer look at their skin as a burden, but as a crown, proof that they are survivors, leaders, and creators of history. They begin to say out loud what was once whispered: we are not less. We are not broken. We are equal. And here lies the true transformation. Traore doesn't call for hate. He doesn't encourage vengeance. Instead, he plants a seed of pride rooted in peace. He teaches that equality does not mean tearing others down. It means standing tall until everyone rises together. That's why his influence terrifies racists more than any weapon ever could. Because think about it. How do you fight against a movement that refuses to hate you back? How do you destroy people who will not let your insults define them, who meet your anger with pride and your fear with love? You can't. Hatred loses its fuel when it has no one willing to burn. From the streets of Harlem to the classrooms of Atlanta, from the neighborhoods of Detroit to the churches of Mississippi, people begin to carry Traore's message as if it were their own. White Americans who once stayed silent now speak out against racism, not because they are guilty, but because they believe in a better, fairer society. Latinos, Asians, Africans, and Europeans begin to see that this fight is not about color, it is about humanity. This is where the world changes. What started as a call for African sovereignty transforms into a global anthem for dignity. The fear that once divided people becomes the glue that unites them. Even those who once resisted, those who clung to racist ideologies, find themselves surrounded by a society that no longer tolerates hate. And slowly, the culture of silence begins to collapse. In Burkina Faso, Traore tells his people, "Our fight is not just for land, or for gold, or for minerals. Our fight is for dignity, for us, for our children, and for every Black person across the world who has been told they are less." And across the ocean, Black Americans echo his words, reshaping them into their own truth. We are proud. We are equal. We are free. Imagine that moment, a world where pride is no longer seen as a threat, but as the beginning of peace. Where being Black in America, Africa, Europe, or anywhere else is not a curse, but a source of strength. Where whites and Blacks, once divided by centuries of mistrust, can finally look at each other not as enemies, but as equals, bound by shared humanity. That is Traore's legacy. Not just a leader of Burkina Faso, not just a soldier in a uniform, but a symbol of fearless pride, a man who dared to terrify racists not with violence, but with the unstoppable power of dignity, unity, and love. And maybe, just maybe, that is how racism finally ends. not with one battle or one law, but with one unstoppable truth, that no race is above another, and no person should ever live in shame for who they are. The racists are afraid, and they should be, because the future belongs to equality.